Hey, what's up guys? Rains here with Worship Online. I'm an instructor here with Worship Online. I also do a decent amount of teaching drum lessons here in Nashville at Nelson Drum Shop down the street. I do a lot of virtual and in-person lessons, and if you are interested in checking out or taking these lessons a little step further, feel free to check out rainswall.com or find me on Instagram or something. I'd love to connect with you and kind of talk about that journey with you as well. Today we are going to be talking about whether or not you are playing your cymbals the right way or the wrong way, because there is definitely a right way and a wrong way with most things in life, and today we are covering the topic of cymbals. Ride cymbal, crashes, hi-hats, all of it, guys. So part one, we're going to be talking about the ride cymbal and the hi-hat, really what's keeping the beat going, you know, the different type of things that those bring to the table. And then in part two, we're going to be moving on to our crash cymbals, how we can be playing them and not breaking them, kind of just really going down that route as well. To be able to watch part two of this video, make sure you check out the link below in the description. Just click on that, enter in your email address, and then we're going to email you directly the video, the part two video that we're going to be covering with the crash cymbals. So let's go ahead and get started with the ride cymbal. All right, guys, we are going to start with the ride cymbal, how you're playing it, how it's set up, all of those things included. Today we are playing a 24-inch Joey Waronker Istanbul Agop ride cymbal. This is one of the big ride cymbals that are used in worship music, but I will also say do not worry about that if you do not have that ride. Really, a lot of what goes into how you sound is really has to do with how you're hitting, your touch, and really your feel with how you're playing on the drum set. So you can do a lot of things with a Zildjian, a custom ride cymbal, an A Zildjian, you know, no matter what you have to work with, guys, just make sure that you realize that. But with this ride cymbal in itself, it does have a good, nice undertone layer, as well as having that nice attack on the top. So that's really why a lot of worship players kind of like, you know, go towards this ride cymbal and keep it on their lineup when they're playing, because it really can kind of give you that big full body, that crash, but also have a good attack as well. So today we're going to be talking a lot about how to hit this thing and make it sound the way it needs to sound. Now, starting out, I like to make sure that this thing is angled at a nice kind of 45-degree angle. I'm not going to go way up here, because then I won't really be able to dig into the actual crash of the ride. You know, I'm not going to do like a 90-degree angle, so all I have is the stick definition. But I'm not going to go completely flat. You know, if you go flat, then you're kind of reaching to get that, you know, that stick definition on top of the ride cymbal. But this right here is really good feel for me, so I can kind of go, I can dig in, get that crash. I can also play on the top with being able to, that's really naturally just kind of, this is where my arm sits right here. You know, if you're a taller person, then raise that thing up a little bit. If you're a little bit shorter, go down with it. You know what I'm saying? Make sure it's just really natural. And it's kind of like we talked about with the snare drum. It's like a natural just feel of like how we play. We covered that in an earlier video with stick technique. Same deal. Very natural, just right here. You know, you're not having to work too hard for that ride cymbal sound. So starting out, when we're striking the ride cymbal, let's just worry about playing it on top for right now. We're just going to be lifting off just like we normally do, and we're really just going for a nice stick definition. This is where we're just playing maybe like a chiller chorus, or you're just using it to keep time. Anything that just really kind of just gives you that nice, almost, you know, you hear it a lot in worship music, but you have like the shaker kind of sound where it's just, maybe you're not playing a shaker, but you're able to kind of keep that timbre going, just to kind of keep some sort of momentum going. Very similar to that. But just play it on the top and just pull the sound out of the cymbal just like so. Now, if you play too close to the edge, you'll get more of a wash sound. If you play closer to the bell, you're obviously going to get a lot more, you know, precise sound, less ring. So if you were kind of like playing a really chill set and you don't want it to be super ringy, then up here is great. Where you obviously have a lot more ring coming off the edge there. So like I said, that's normally for a little bit more chill verse or a chill chorus. Or you're just keeping time, but make sure you're just kind of really pulling the sound out there. Now, when we're also doing like a really big, you know, huge sound, we want to be pulling the sound out of our cymbal as well, but now we're going to be talking about crashing it a little bit more. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a lot of drummers that just crash and they just go for it. Now, I will say, that there are definitely opportunities for that in a song. But what I like to also kind of do is keep some sort of articulation going. Because if you think about it, the role of the cymbal is subdividing. It's keeping everybody together. It's keeping the momentum going. And if you think about like even some of your favorite songs, there's usually something going. There's usually a shaker. There's usually an acoustic guitar. There's some sort of cymbal. Something's happening to keep that articulation going. It kind of keeps everything subdivided so we know where we're at in the song, and it just keeps that momentum going. It's like one of those things in the background. You don't really think about it, but it's something is added there. Maybe it starts out really spacey, and then all of a sudden that type of thing is added. So we're still doing that even when we're playing the big anthemic stuff. So in order for me to still have that articulation sound when I'm playing and I'm crashing the ride, I like to do an in-between. I'm not actually crashing it straight up. I'm doing a thing where the shaft of my stick is actually striking right here on the edge, the last portion, the second half of the ride cymbal, like so. So I'm able to get that nice articulation of the stick hitting the cymbal, but I'm not getting the open. I'm getting more of an articulation sound. You will notice that it's a little bit louder, so make sure that you're just controlling that. You're not just like crushing this sound because it is a little bit louder. Then I would say talk to your front of house person just to make sure that you're not playing too loud on the cymbals. And also when I'm crashing my ride and I'm kind of doing the in-between, I'll also kind of try to keep that subdivision going with a tap in between my crashes with just a tap on the ride cymbal. And that's one of those really small things you don't even really hear, but I'm keeping the momentum. I'm kind of still doing that shaker aspect even though I'm crashing on the ride. This is what that sounds like. If somebody that's not a drummer, honestly, if they said, you know, if you asked them what was happening on the ride cymbal, they would have said you're just hitting ba, da, 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 right? But if you really zoom in and kind of listen, you can hear that in between going, which is really kind of the glue for that type of beat in a lot of ways. Now, I will say there are moments where it's good to have that open space. It don't always feel like you have to fill that in, but in most situations, I like to kind of keep that going, even if it's really quiet, just to keep that articulation going, because it's one of those small things that really helps keep the band together. I mean, your vocalist, to keep them confident when they're singing on top of that as well, because they can hear that subdivision happening. So make sure you're just kind of hitting around there. And then obviously, we all know how to do a crash. The big thing that I would say is making sure that you're holding on really, like this, we've talked about this a ton with our different articulation videos and our stick technique video, but make sure you're not hitting this thing with a really tight grip. Keep that thing loose. Crack cymbals happen. Different things happen when you start to really just hold on tight and just like hit it like you're just like, you know, hitting the baseball bat or something that you feel like you're following through, you're just like hitting into something. That is where things start to break. But if you can kind of hit it in a motion where you're pulling off of the cymbal or you're kind of swiping, you've seen drummers do this with their ride cymbal. Different motions like that are generally not putting all of the impact on that cymbal, that part of the cymbal. Then in long term, if you do that for 10 years, you're still gonna have that same cymbal. But if you're just driving a stick into it when you're crashing the whole time, then that cymbal will be gone in about a year, probably, depending on how hard you're hitting it. And you know, that's why China cymbals and stuff like that always crack, because usually we're hitting those things pretty hard. So that's the same thing applies with the ride cymbal. Another thing to think about on the ride cymbal is how you're playing the bell of the ride. Now, most cymbals have bells, but typically you're gonna hit the ride cymbal bell more often than a crash cymbal bell. I mean, it's just, you know, part of it. But, because you hear a lot of grooves with that bell in it. But when you're hitting that ride cymbal bell, just make sure you're using the shaft of the stick across the edge of the bell. Notice I'm still pulling off of the cymbal. No, really a loose grip. A lot of grooves kind of go back and forth. But just like so, when you're playing a groove, so make sure just the actual just shaft of the stick is hitting right there in the center of the bell, not too far towards the cymbal or towards the end of the center. This is what it sounds like. One thing I do want to touch on that also really helps with worship music is when you initially crash, say on beat one of a big chorus, and you have that big hit. It typically helps for one of your crashes to be your ride cymbal, because when you crash that, it starts to vibrate. And it's one of those things that it's a really small thing that you notice, but say if I go into a chorus and I just hit my crashes and then go into my ride cymbal, it's almost like, since this thing wasn't prepared, it wasn't vibrating already, it takes it a second to open up and really get big. And so it might be like a hit, kind of quiet, and then the ride cymbal is kind of present. Whereas if you crash your ride with, say, another crash, and then you go into hitting your ride cymbal, that thing's already opened up for the initial crash, so it's ready to go. So when you actually play the beat on your ride cymbal, it didn't do the dip and then get loud and present in the mix. It's just, you crash it and then it's there already because it's already opened up. So that's a good thing to think about as well. There's a lot of different ways to kind of prep your cymbals to get ready for a crash. You don't have to do it all the time. A lot of times you can just crash right on beat one. But if you're ever able to, sometimes it's also a nice thing just to kind of do like a little bit of a build-up. And then crash on beat one or something, just to prep your cymbal to kind of get ready. One, it can kind of help, get your cymbals prepared or opened up, so then when you crash it, those things are just there. Whereas if they're just dead and they're not moving at all, and then you just crash, you have a little bit of a different sound, and it's typically not as open or full. But that's a very small, minute thing. That's something that if you go through all of these ideas and then you're like, all right, Rains, what's next? That's one of those things that's good to think about. That type of thing also really helps in the studio as well. So now, moving from the ride to our hi-hat, in a very similar way, we still use this cymbal to have that articulation to subdivide within the drum beat. It definitely plays a little bit of a different role, as you already know. If you are a drummer, you know what the hi-hat does. You can use it in a lot of situations. A closed hi-hat gives you that nice chick during the verse of a song, and then you open it for a nice wash for your chorus. You can also crash your hi-hats, to give you that cool sizzle. That's a little bit of a different timbre than your typical crash cymbal. Anyways, it's a really great thing to be able to utilize and to understand and know how to play correctly as well, because it really will help you not getting too worn out. Today we're using a pair of 30th anniversary Cymbal 15-inch hi-hats. I chose the 15 because sometimes I'm playing worship, sometimes I'm playing other, whether it be just like rock or country or with my band Sidewalk Prophets. It's nice to have a little bit smaller hat that's not too big, but I can still control it. But it also works really well in the worship world. You will notice that a lot of drummers use really big 17-inch crashes as their hi-hats, anything to kind of have that buttery, washy sound. Those are great, but I will say, as far as versatility goes, if you ever were to play a worship song that just needed a little bit more of that tight, high-pitched chick, sometimes it's hard to really get that. So if you do get a larger cymbal, make sure you get something that you're able to really control and also get that nice articulation for those songs, because worship songs are starting to kind of come with a lot of different varieties and not just the open sound, So when we're playing our hi-hat, there's a couple different ways. You have your foot factor going on, so how open it is or how closed it is, and then also just how we're playing it. Now we're using very similar techniques as far as how we've been doing. We're pulling off of the cymbal. We're kind of keeping up off of as we're going. Now, typically when you're playing the hi-hat, you've heard the shoulder and then tip, shoulder, tip, kind of this up and down motion to kind of give you that groove when you're playing just a simple beat with your hi-hat. That kind of helps kind of give that motion. It's almost like a drive. It kind of takes something that feels really just like simple and just monotonous almost, and then also it kind of brings that to life almost. It kind of just gives that. Now, I will say in most worship songs, you kind of feel, you hear that going on. Now, there are plenty of opportunities, especially like in the R&B world, all types of situations, and even in some worship sense as well, where you're actually going to be playing more of a straight, just same hit the entire time. I play a couple songs like that right now with Sidewalk, and but it's also a good thing for that as well. And typically, when you are playing that straight sound, it's a little bit more open hi-hat. So you were to lift your foot up a little bit and just have that nice kind of in-between sound, not the or the sound. So just to demonstrate really quickly with that shaft of the stick on the side, and then the pull up here. So, and we're also, if you kind of think about how we did in the stick technique video, where we talked about doing a double stroke, where we come up, and we use our fingers to snap up to get that second. Very similar, we're gonna be doing the same thing with our hi-hat, that kind of thing. So this is what that sounds like. Now, here's straight with a little bit of an open, just to kind of give you that a little bit of that sizzle. It's almost like a pre-chorus or like a second verse where we got a little bit more energy going, but we're not there. But we don't want to do like the simple, just closed hi-hat. We want to open it a little bit. It kind of gives it a little bit more of a grit. This is what that sounds like. And then that can take you into the next chorus, slowly open it up. And then also, I like to use my hi-hat when I'm playing drum fills. You know, take what you would also play like on your high tom or your floor tom. Ga doom, ga ga goom, ga bzz. You know, maybe add a kick drum with it. Ga bzz, ga ga go boom. Simple ways just to kind of use that. I really like Elevation. I listen to a lot of their worship music, and I really feel like their drummer utilizes the open hi-hat a lot in his drum fills. So kind of take, you know, different rhythms that we've talked about. Even in the stick exercise, when in the stick technique video part 2, where we talked about using different rhythms, you can also do that with just crashing on your hi-hat at like the 1E and E4, God, boom, or something that's kind of off. You know, you can have a lot of fun with just being able to use that. It's just a different timbre, and it kind of gives you a different way to speak and to have a different drum fill before you go into your chorus. Lastly, with the hi-hat, you can do a lot of creative things with the actual chick of the hi-hat. When I say chick, I mean just lifting it up with your foot and closing down. You've used the chick, I'm sure, a lot with a lot of different types, you know, of beats. What I like to utilize it for, one thing that you can use it for is just keeping time. Say if you don't have a click track and, you know, you're playing a tom groove and it's just easy just to do. Anything like that, even if you're playing the ride cymbal, you can kind of use it to keep time. I know a lot of people are using click tracks or, you know, having the click in their ears at this point, so you don't necessarily have to do that now. But what I like to utilize it for now is being able to kind of take where you're at and say you want to go up a little level, like maybe like one step, but you're not completely there yet. You just want to go up a little bit. That's when you can introduce the hi-hat. So maybe you're doing a bridge and you're introducing a tom part, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I'm doing a 4 on the floor, but I want to add something to it to kind of give it a little bit more of a, you know, a different feel, like kind of just raise it a little bit. Maybe I would add this on the offbeat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and kick, hi-hat, kick, hi-hat. I'll show you, I'll play 2 measures of the tom groove with the kick just on 1, and then I'll show you how we can go into the 4 on the floor with the tom groove and then add the hi-hat on the ands. So you can add the 4 on the floor, add this going. You can also keep it really, if you want to like actually just take it back a little bit and just do like a simple tom groove, but then maybe splash it. So instead of just stomping right on it, lift your foot off right after stomping. Like sometimes if you kind of take your foot and move it a little bit to the side and just go, you can kind of have that little bit of that crash. So you can kind of add that like on beat 3. So you can do different things like that as well. Also, like if you're at the big chorus, same exact thing. Say the worship leader's going, hey, we're doing one more big chorus, keep going, and you're already crashing on your ride cymbal. A way to kind of like take it up another notch is to just basically keeping time, but just to kind of add that next layer of crash, and just the energy kind of takes it up a little bit, and you don't really have to do much other than just keep crashing that, and then you're good to go as far as like taking it to that next level. I'll do 2 measures of me playing just the big groove, and then I'll add this for the next 2 measures. it's just one of those things that you can kind of add just to give you that next extra little boost to kind of take it to the next level. And then hopefully after you're there, you might have to do something different, but usually you'll crash out at the end of that because that should be the last big moment that you should be playing. All right, so now that we've covered our ride cymbal and our hi-hat and all of the different ways to play those correctly, now we're gonna move on to our crash cymbals. This is a really important thing. You can kind of just breeze on by. Like there's not a lot of content out there about how to hit a crash cymbal. Everybody can tell you how to play a groove, how to kind of make it feel better. There's a lot of ways there, which is all super beneficial information. But if you do not know how to hit a crash cymbal the right way, you are going to be spending way more money than somebody that does. And I will just say, because crash cymbals are kind of expensive these days, in general, cymbals are. But all I'm saying is just make sure you're hitting them the right way, because you want to be able to treat the instrument that you're playing the best that you can, so it can last as long as it can and just sound as good as it can as well. Now, there is a spot for crack cymbals. Crack cymbals can sound pretty cool too. It's a vibe, but right now we're talking about how to not have that, and so we can just have a nice, good crash cymbal sound. All right, let's go ahead and get started. You do not want to hit your crash cymbal like this.